The fading sunlight glinted off the surface of Mount Hope Bay as the rescue divers emerged from the murky depths. Their faces told the story before their words could. Ella Mack had been found 75 feet below, her body gently swaying with the current, dive gear intact, eyes forever fixed on a surface she would never reach again. Just 14 days after saying, "I do," her wedding ring now rested on the cold hand of a woman who would never see her first anniversary. What turns a dream honeymoon into a nightmare? How does a celebration of love become a scene of tragedy? And when the person who vowed to protect you is the last one to see you alive, where does coincidence end and suspicion begin? As we explore this chilling story, we want to thank our Guilty Whispers subscribers for creating such a supportive community. We love to know how diverse our community is, so remember to leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. If you haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet, hit that subscribe button to become a part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Tonight's story goes beyond the normal accidents that can occur in dangerous waters. It delves into the darkness that can hide in plain sight, in the heart of someone who once promised forever. As you listen, pay close attention to the timeline of events, the contradicting testimonies, and the mysterious woman who vanished just hours after Ella took her final breath. This is not just a diving accident, it's a tale of betrayal, greed, and a perfect crime that nearly went undetected beneath the waves. Baltimore's Hampton neighborhood was where Ella Mack built her life and reputation. At Frederick Douglass High School, she wasn't just another counselor, she was the one students specifically requested when they needed someone who truly understood. With her office door always open and a talent for making troubled teens feel valued, Ella had found her calling. Ella believed every kid deserved a champion, recalled Principal Anthony Morris. She'd stay late, come in early. The students called her Miss Fix-It because she never gave up on finding solutions. Growing up in a family of educators, Ella had always been drawn to helping others. Her mother taught elementary school for 30 years, and her father was a community college professor. Their influence shaped her deeply, instilling values of compassion and dedication that defined her approach to her career and relationships. At 32, Ella's professional life was flourishing, but romantically, she had almost given up. After a series of disappointing relationships, she told Bailey Dorsey, her best friend since college, that she was taking a year off from dating to focus on herself. That's exactly when Jevon showed up, Bailey remembered, a bittersweet smile crossing her face. At that charity gala for the Education Foundation, Ella went to represent the school, and Jevon was there because his company donated software. The way she described it, it was like one of those movie moments, eyes meeting across the room. Jevon Perkins worked as a senior software engineer for a cybersecurity firm. At 36, he presented as the perfect package, intelligent, financially stable, and attentive. His reserved nature balanced Ella's more outgoing personality. Where she was spontaneous, he was planned. Where she was emotional, he was measured. These differences seemed complementary at first. He was so calculated in everything, Bailey explained. Their first date, he had researched her favorite restaurant, made reservations at the exact right time to get the best table by the window, had already looked up wine pairings. Ella found it charming, said it showed how much effort he put into making her happy. The relationship progressed quickly. Within 3 months, they were discussing marriage. By month 5, Jevon had proposed with a custom-designed ring that incorporated birthstones from both their families. It felt fast, Bailey admitted, twisting a tissue in her hands. I tried to talk to her about it once. Asked if maybe they could have a longer engagement, at least a year. But Ella said when you know, you know. She said, Bailey, I'm 32. When you find the right one, why wait? The wedding was planned for October, a small ceremony at the Baltimore Museum of Art followed by a reception at the nearby garden. 60 guests, mostly family and close friends, gathered to witness their vows. Photos from the event showed Ella radiant in an ivory sheath dress, her hair adorned with small white flowers. Jevon stood tall beside her, his arm protectively around her waist, smile never quite reaching his eyes. During his vows, Jevon said he would protect her from all harm and cherish every adventure they would share, Bailey recalled. Those words haunt me now. What many guests didn't know was that behind the perfect facade, the couple had been having one recurring disagreement: Jevon's passion for scuba diving and Ella's deep fear of water. Ella had nearly drowned as a child, an incident that left her with a lasting anxiety about deep water. Though she had learned to swim as an adult, enough to feel safe in a pool, the idea of open water diving terrified her. Jevon kept telling her she would love it once she tried it, Bailey said. He said it would be a way for them to share his passion. 2 weeks before the wedding, she enrolled in a certification class at his insistence. She was trying to conquer her fear for him. The certification process was difficult for Ella. The instructor noted that while she completed the necessary skills, she showed obvious anxiety during open water sessions. Still, determined to make her new husband happy, she pushed through and obtained her basic certification just days before the wedding. For their honeymoon, Jevon selected Mount Hope Bay, Rhode Island, known for its stunning underwater visibility and diverse marine life, but also for its challenging and sometimes dangerous diving conditions. The cold Atlantic waters were a far cry from the controlled environment of Ella's certification pool in Baltimore. She called me after they arrived at the Bayview Inn, Bailey said. She sounded happy but nervous. She said the water looked so vast from their balcony. She joked that Jevon had packed more gear for diving than clothes for the trip. The first 3 days of their honeymoon appeared perfect in the photos Ella shared. Breakfast overlooking the bay, walks along the rocky shoreline, candlelit dinners at local seafood restaurants. But the diving excursions, which began on day 4, told a different story through the tension visible in Ella's posture and the forced smile in the pictures of her in her wetsuit. The last message I got from her was a photo, Bailey said, her voice breaking. She was on the dive boat, already in her gear. She captioned it, "About to see Phantom's Trench. Wish me luck." I didn't realize I needed to wish for so much more than luck. What no one knew then was that Jevon had already visited Mount Hope Bay 3 times in the past year, a fact that would only emerge after Ella's death. And he hadn't always dived alone. The Bayview Inn sat perched on a bluff overlooking the churning waters of Mount Hope Bay. The quaint white clapboard building with its blue shutters had hosted honeymooners for generations, its guest book filled with signatures of couples who returned year after year to celebrate anniversaries. Ella and Jevon's names would be among the last entries in its pages. On their first morning, over blueberry pancakes and coffee on the inn's wraparound porch, Jevon outlined his diving plans for the week. He had already booked 3 excursions with Ocean Ventures, the most experienced dive operation in the area. Ella's smile faltered only slightly when he mentioned that the 3rd dive would be to Phantom's Trench, a site known for its dramatic walls and unpredictable currents. "We don't have to do that one if you're not ready," he told her, reaching for her hand. "But I think you'll be comfortable enough by then. The first 2 dives are easy." A guest at the neighboring table later recalled overhearing this conversation and noticing how Ella nodded without speaking, her eyes fixed on the dark waters below. Lionel Booker had been guiding dives in Mount Hope Bay for 15 years. A former Coast Guard rescue diver, he had an instinctive feel for the water's moods and a reputation for prioritizing safety above all else. When Ella and Jevon arrived for their orientation at Ocean Ventures, Lionel's experienced eye immediately noted Ella's nervousness. "I see it all the time," Lionel later explained. "Someone who's just certified, coming with their more experienced partner. You can tell right away who's comfortable and who's doing it to please someone else." After reviewing their certification cards and experience levels, Lionel suggested they start with a refresher in the protected cove before attempting open water dives. Jevon dismissed the idea. "He told me they had limited time and wanted to maximize their dive opportunities," Lionel recalled. Said his wife was a quick learner and would be fine. When Lionel looked to Ella for confirmation, she nodded but clutched her equipment with white knuckles. The first dive at Shipyard Point was in relatively shallow water with minimal current. Even so, Lionel stayed close to Ella, noting how she gripped Jevon's hand throughout the 30-minute exploration. Her breathing rate, visible in her bubbles, remained elevated, a clear sign of anxiety. Jevon, meanwhile, seemed focused on photographing the marine life, often swimming ahead and waiting impatiently for Ella to catch up. At the surface afterward, she was shaking, Lionel said. Not just from the cold water. When I asked if she was okay, she said yes, but her eyes said something different. Her husband just commented on how they needed to work on her air consumption. That night, Ella called Bailey. She sounded exhausted, Bailey remembered. She said the water was so cold it felt like needles, even through the wetsuit. But she was proud she'd done it. When I asked if she was enjoying it, there was this pause. Then she said, "I'm getting there. Jevon says I'll love the next site even more." The second dive, 2 days later, was to Breakwater Reef, known for its colorful anemones and small caverns. The weather had worsened overnight, with wind creating choppy surface conditions. Lionel considered canceling but decided the underwater visibility would still be acceptable. What he didn't know was that Ella had been up most of the night with anxiety, reading weather reports and accident statistics for the Bay Area on her phone while Jevon slept soundly beside her. During the briefing, Jevon mentioned he might explore one of the larger swim-throughs, a tunnel-like formation in the reef. Lionel emphasized that newer divers should stay outside these formations. Your wife should wait while you go through, or better yet, save it for another trip when you're diving with someone of your experience level, he advised. According to another diver in the group, Jevon's jaw tightened at this suggestion. Underwater, conditions were as challenging as Lionel had feared. Visibility was reduced to about 15 feet, and the surge pushed divers back and forth over the reef. Ella stayed close to Lionel while Jevon explored more aggressively, at one point disappearing into a cavern despite the earlier warning. When he swam out of sight, I saw real fear in her eyes through her mask, Lionel recounted. She started breathing faster, so I had her focus on me, showed her how to control her breaths. When Jevon reappeared, he seemed annoyed that we hadn't followed. After the dive, Lionel overheard a tense exchange between the couple. Jevon wanted to switch to Phantom's Trench for their next outing, scheduled for 2 days later. Ella quietly suggested they repeat the Breakwater Reef dive instead, saying she'd feel more confident returning to a familiar site. He told her she wouldn't improve by staying in her comfort zone, Lionel said. Then he walked away to rinse his gear, leaving her standing there. That afternoon, while Ella rested at the inn, Jevon told her he was going to check on equipment at the dive shop. Instead, he drove to Bennett's Dive Supply at the far end of the harbor. Leonard Bennett, the shop's owner, was helping another customer when Jevon entered, but noticed him speaking with a woman near the back of the store. They seemed familiar with each other, Leonard would later tell investigators. Not just casual conversation. When she touched his arm, he didn't move away. The woman was Jalinda Butler, an advanced dive instructor who occasionally helped with technical dives at Ocean Ventures. What no one at Mount Hope Bay knew was that Jalinda and Jevon had dated for nearly 2 years before his relationship with Ella. They had met through a diving forum, their shared passion for underwater exploration creating an instant connection. Security camera footage from Bennett's Dive Supply showed Jevon and Jalinda in close conversation for nearly 20 minutes. At one point, she handed him something small that he pocketed quickly. They parted with a brief embrace, Jalinda leaving through the back door while Jevon purchased additional weights at the front counter. When Jevon returned to the inn, Ella was on the phone with Bailey, but quickly ended the call. She sounded off, Bailey recalled. Like she was trying to keep her voice normal but couldn't quite manage it. The last thing she said was, "I'll call you after tomorrow's dive. It's supposed to be the big one." That evening, Ella sent a series of increasingly worried texts to Bailey. 7:42 p.m., found out today Jay has been here before. Several times. Never mentioned it. 8:15 p.m. Tomorrow's dive site has had 3 fatalities in the past decade. Jay says that's just because of inexperienced divers. Says I'll be fine with him watching me. 9:36 p.m. Keep having this feeling like I'm missing something important. Am I just being paranoid? 10:22 p.m. Going to try to get some sleep. Wish me luck for tomorrow. If you were here, would you tell me to trust my gut or my husband? Bailey responded to each message with reassurance but later admitted to feeling increasingly uneasy. I told her to trust herself, but also reminded her that fear can make us imagine things that aren't there. I've never regretted anything more than not telling her to get on the next flight home. What would you do if someone you loved was pushing you towards something that terrified you? Would you find the courage to stand your ground or push through your fear to make them happy? Leave your thoughts in the comments below about where we should draw the line between supporting our partners and protecting ourselves. On the morning of the Phantom's trench dive, the weather reports warned of changing conditions. A cold front was moving in, bringing stronger winds later in the day. Lionel checked the forecast and decided they could complete the dive safely if they departed early. When Ella and Jevon arrived at the dock, he noticed immediately that something was different. She was quiet, very focused, Lionel said. Not panicky like before, just determined. He seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. What no one noticed was the tall figure of Jalinda Butler watching from the harbor parking lot as the dive boat pulled away, her own gear packed in the trunk of her car. October 17th dawned with a silvery mist hanging over Mount Hope Bay. The water's surface was deceptively calm, belying the strong currents that would be running beneath. Ocean Ventures dive boat, the Explorer, was scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. with a group of 6 divers, including Ella and Jevon. Lionel Booker arrived an hour early to prepare equipment and check the latest weather reports. The barometric pressure was dropping faster than predicted, Lionel later testified. I almost cancelled the trip right then, but the radar showed we had a good 3-hour window before conditions would deteriorate. When Ella and Jevon arrived at the dock, they presented a study in contrasts. Jevon moved with the confident efficiency of an experienced diver, assembling his gear methodically while chatting with the other divers about underwater photography. Ella was quieter than usual, her movements careful but deliberate as she checked her equipment twice, then a third time. She asked me to verify her air tank and regulator, Lionel recalled. That's always a good sign in a new diver, being thorough. But there was something in her eyes that morning. Not quite fear, more like resignation. During the boat briefing, Lionel explained the unique features of Phantom's Trench, a narrow underwater canyon with walls that plunged to over 100 feet. Its name came from the way divers sometimes reported seeing shadowy figures in the depths, just optical illusions created by the play of light through the water column. The site was beautiful but demanding, with currents that could change direction unexpectedly. We'll stay at 60 feet maximum, Lionel instructed the group. The current is running north to south today, so we'll start at the northern entry point and drift along the wall. Stay with your buddy at all times. If you get separated, look for 1 minute, then begin a controlled ascent. As the boat approached the dive site, one of the other divers noticed Jevon removing his dive computer and replacing it with a different model. When questioned, he explained that his primary unit had been giving erratic depth readings. This detail would later become significant to investigators. At 9:17 a.m., the divers began entering the water in buddy pairs. Lionel went first with an experienced couple from Boston. Ella and Jevon were second, followed by the final pair. Video footage from another diver's camera captured Ella's giant stride entry into the water, her form perfect despite her inexperience, a testament to her determination to master the skills. Beneath the surface, visibility was better than expected, about 30 feet of clear, cold blue. The group descended slowly along the mooring line, equalizing ear pressure at regular intervals. Ella's breathing, audible through her regulator, was controlled and steady. She kept one hand on the line and the other reached toward Jevon, who swam slightly ahead. "The first 5 minutes were textbook," said Lionel, who kept the group in sight while leading the way. Everyone was maintaining position, air consumption was normal, and the current was gentle, just as predicted. At approximately 55 feet, they reached the edge of the trench. The underwater landscape opened dramatically, a vast wall of rock falling away into deeper blue, adorned with white anemones and orange cup corals that swayed in the current. It was, by all accounts, breathtaking. The group moved along the wall in a loose formation, Lionel in front, the experienced couple behind him, Ella and Jevon in the middle, and the final pair bringing up the rear. Fish darted among them, striped bass, tautog, and bright sea robins skimming the sandy bottom. At the 20-minute mark, they reached a section where the trench widened into a bowl-like formation. This area, known locally as the cauldron, was where the current sometimes formed a gentle vortex. Lionel signaled for the group to stay close to the wall and slightly higher, at about 50 feet, to avoid the stronger flow in the center. What happened next was pieced together from multiple accounts, dive computer data, and later expert analysis. According to Jevon's statement, Ella suddenly indicated she was having trouble with her buoyancy. He claimed she began to drift toward the center of the cauldron despite his attempts to help her adjust her inflator. When he reached for her, he said, the current pulled them apart. He reported that he tried to follow but lost sight of her in a sudden swirl of silt kicked up from the bottom. But the dive computers told a different story. Ella's device showed a rapid descent from 52 feet to 78 feet in less than 2 minutes, a rate that suggested more than just current. At the same time, Jevon's computer recorded him remaining at 50 feet for nearly 3 minutes before beginning a direct ascent to the surface, with no indication of an attempted rescue descent. Lionel's account added critical details. "I turned back to check on the group and saw they were separated," he testified. Ella was drifting deeper, not in control of her movement. That happens sometimes with inexperienced divers, they overcompensate with their breathing and lose buoyancy. But what was strange was Jevon's position. He wasn't moving toward her. He was stationary, just watching. Lionel immediately signaled the other divers to hold position and descended rapidly toward Ella. By the time he reached 70 feet, he could no longer see her. The visibility had decreased dramatically with depth, and the current was significantly stronger than expected. "I had to make the safety call," Lionel said, his voice still heavy with regret months later. "I couldn't risk the rest of the group." We conducted an underwater search pattern for 3 minutes, then I sent up a surface marker and had everyone begin a staged ascent. On the surface, Jevon was already aboard the Explorer when the others emerged from the water. According to the boat captain, he was eerily calm as he reported that his wife had experienced a problem and descended out of sight. Most people would be frantic, the captain later told investigators. He just stood there, dripping on the deck, and said we needed to call for help. No emotion. Nothing. The Coast Guard was notified at 10:04 a.m. Their rescue divers arrived by helicopter at 10:37 a.m. and entered the water by 10:42 a.m. Using underwater scooters and specialized equipment for deep water search, they located Ella's body at 11:23 a.m. She was found at a depth of 95 feet, near the bottom of the trench. Her equipment was intact, air tank still containing pressure equivalent to about 25 minutes of breathing at that depth, weight belt secure, fins still on her feet. There were no signs of equipment failure or entanglement. The most disturbing detail was her mask. It was in place over her eyes, but filled with water. An indication that she had been conscious and struggling as she descended. An experienced diver would have cleared it with a simple technique. A panicked diver might not remember how. The medical examiner would later determine drowning as the cause of death, with cold water immersion as a contributing factor. The report noted that there were no unexplained bruises or injuries, nothing to suggest foul play in a physical sense. But one detail stood out to Inspector Kara McCoy when she reviewed the autopsy findings. Ella's weight belt contained 4 pounds more weight than would be standard for a diver of her size and experience in those conditions. The additional weight would have made maintaining buoyancy significantly more difficult, especially for someone still mastering the skill. When questioned about this discrepancy, Jevons stated that Ella had wanted the extra weight because she felt too buoyant during their previous dive. No one could verify this claim. Lionel stated he would never have approved such an addition for a novice diver, and that Ella had not mentioned it during his pre-dive equipment check. As Ella's body was transferred to the medical examiner's boat, witnesses described Jevons' behavior as distant and mechanical. He asked practical questions about transportation arrangements and paperwork but expressed no visible grief. When offered a shock blanket and hot drink by a Coast Guard officer, he declined, instead asking if he could retrieve some items from his wife's dive bag. He wanted her phone, the officer recalled. Said he needed to notify family. But instead of making calls, I saw him scrolling through her messages for several minutes. Then he deleted something. By the time Ella's body reached shore, dark clouds had moved in over Mount Hope Bay. As if the weather itself were responding to the tragedy, cold rain began to fall, churning the water's surface into a gray froth that erased any trace of what had transpired below. The initial police report classified Ella's death as an accidental drowning. In such cases, particularly involving inexperienced divers, the assumption of user error or natural hazards typically prevails. Jevons' account, that his wife had panicked, lost buoyancy control, and descended beyond his reach, aligned with a common scenario in diving fatalities. This might have remained the official conclusion if not for Bailey Dorsey's persistence and a series of small inconsistencies that gradually caught the attention of Inspector Kara McCoy. McCoy, a 15-year veteran of the Rhode Island State Police with a specialization in suspicious deaths, wasn't originally assigned to the case. Her involvement began 3 days after the incident, when Bailey called the department demanding a more thorough investigation. Bailey called me 6 times that first day, McCoy recalled. She insisted that Ella would never have continued with the dive if she was truly as frightened as witnesses described. She kept saying, something made her stay in that water, and it wasn't her choice. What convinced McCoy to look deeper wasn't just Bailey's persistence but a detail she mentioned. Ella had recently increased her life insurance policy from $250,000 to $1 million, with Jevon as the sole beneficiary. The policy had a standard 2-year suicide exclusion but would pay out immediately for accidental death. Insurance policies aren't unusual, McCoy explained. But the timing raised a flag. The increase was processed just 3 weeks before the wedding. When McCoy pulled the application paperwork, another detail emerged. The policy included a specific rider covering adventure sports, including scuba diving, that would typically be excluded or heavily restricted for a novice participant. The additional premium for this coverage was substantial, nearly doubling the monthly cost. Who pays extra to insure against an activity they're terrified of and barely know how to do? McCoy questioned. Unless someone expected that activity to become relevant. Meanwhile, Bailey had been going through Ella's email and text messages, which she had access to through a shared cloud account they had set up years earlier for backing up photos. What she found painted a troubling picture of the weeks leading up to the wedding. Ella had been researching anxiety medication specifically for diving, Bailey told investigators. She'd joined online forums for people with aquaphobia. There were dozens of searches for how to overcome fear of deep water and diving panic attacks. She was really trying to push through this fear. More telling were email exchanges between Ella and Jevon about the honeymoon plans. In one message, Ella had suggested alternatives to Rhode Island, a wine tour in Virginia, hiking in Vermont, even a city getaway to Montreal. Jevon's responses were politely dismissive, emphasizing how much she would love diving once she experienced it properly and how he'd already made non-refundable bookings. He was steering her, Bailey insisted. Every time she suggested something else, he'd bring it back to the diving trip. It was subtle but persistent pressure. 6 days after Ella's death, Jevon cremated her remains in a private ceremony attended only by himself and a funeral director. Neither Ella's parents nor Bailey were notified until afterward. When confronted, Jevon claimed he was respecting Ella's wish for simplicity, though no written directive to this effect was ever found. By this time, Inspector McCoy had begun tracking Jevon's movements before and after the incident. Credit card records revealed he had visited Mount Hope Bay 3 times in the previous year, staying at different accommodations each time. On 2 of these trips, a second room had been charged to his card, one under the name J. Butler. "We didn't know who this J. Butler was at first," McCoy said. "But when we showed the name to Leonard Bennett, he immediately recognized it. Jalinda," he said. "She's a dive instructor who comes through here a few times a year." Bennett provided the crucial link. He described seeing Jevon and Jalinda together at his shop 2 days before the fatal dive. Security footage confirmed this meeting and showed the small object passed between them, what appeared to be a key or similar small metal item. Further investigation revealed that Jalinda Butler had been Jevon's girlfriend for nearly 2 years before his relationship with Ella began. They had apparently met through an online diving forum and shared a passion for technical diving. Social media archives showed them together on multiple diving trips to destinations around the world. "What's interesting," McCoy noted, "is that their relationship seemed to end abruptly about 2 months before Jevon met Ella. No gradual cooling off, no social media drama. Just a complete cessation of contact. Or so it appeared on the surface." Phone records would later show that communication between Jevon and Jalinda never actually stopped, it just moved to a prepaid phone Jevon purchased with cash. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Another diver who had been on the boat that day had been testing a new underwater camera with enhanced low-light capabilities. While reviewing his footage weeks later, he noticed something in the background of several frames, a 4th diver, not part of their group, hovering at the edge of visibility near the bottom of the trench. The figure was distant and blurry, but clearly wearing technical diving gear more advanced than the recreational equipment used by Ella and Jevon. The diver appeared to be observing the group from a distance. In the final frames where this figure was visible, they seemed to be moving deeper into the trench, in the same direction Ella had drifted. Video enhancement was inconclusive in identifying the mystery diver. However, dive shop records confirmed that Jalinda Butler had rented technical diving equipment the morning of the incident, claiming she was meeting a private client for a training dive in a different part of the bay. "The theory we developed," Inspector McCoy explained, was that Jalinda was positioned deeper in the trench, out of sight of the group but in a place where she could intercept someone who drifted down, or was sent down, with too much weight. What exactly happened beneath the surface remains speculative. The prosecution theory suggested that Jevon had deliberately added weights to Ella's belt before the dive, knowing she would struggle to maintain buoyancy in the stronger currents of the trench. Whether Jalinda's role was to ensure Ella didn't survive or simply to be a witness couldn't be proven. What was clear was Jalinda's hasty departure. She checked out of her motel 3 hours after the incident, left her rental car at a train station 40 miles away, and effectively disappeared. International law enforcement still has an active alert for her whereabouts. Despite the mounting circumstantial evidence, prosecutors faced significant challenges in building a murder case. Without direct evidence of tampering with Ella's equipment and with Jalinda unavailable to testify, they couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that Ella's death was anything other than a tragic accident. "Water erases evidence," McCoy said with frustration. "That's what makes these cases so difficult. The crime scene is literally washed away with every current." The insurance company, however, operated under different standards of proof. After a 6-month investigation, they denied Jevon's claim for the $1 million death benefit, citing material misrepresentation regarding Ella's diving experience and reasonable suspicion of fraudulent circumstances. Jevon filed suit against the insurer but withdrew the case before discovery proceedings could force him to testify under oath. He sold their Baltimore home 3 months after Ella's death and relocated to Arizona, a state with no bodies of water suitable for diving. The case remains officially classified as an accidental death, but in the files of Inspector Kara McCoy, it stays open. 1 year after the tragedy, justice remains elusive. Jevon Perkins lives quietly in Sedona, Arizona, working remotely for a new software company. He has never been charged in connection with Ella's death, though the cloud of suspicion follows him through the digital footprints Bailey and others maintain online. Websites dedicated to Ella's memory and forums where amateur detectives continue to dissect every detail of the case. Jalinda Butler's whereabouts remain unknown. Interpol notices distributed to diving communities around the world have yielded occasional reported sightings, in Thailand, South Africa, the Maldives, but nothing concrete. The diving community, once her home, has largely turned against her, with many instructors keeping her photo posted as a warning. Underwater crime creates perfect reasonable doubt, Inspector McCoy reflected during our final interview. Without witnesses, without clear evidence of tampering, without the missing piece of our puzzle named Jalinda Butler, we're left with what we can prove beyond doubt, which, tragically, isn't enough. The investigation into Ella's death revealed a troubling reality about crimes beneath the surface: they're nearly perfect. Water destroys evidence, distorts witness perceptions, and creates natural explanations for what might otherwise be suspicious circumstances. For those with the knowledge to exploit these facts, the depths offer a terrible opportunity. Lionel Booker no longer guides dives to Phantom's Trench. He's become an advocate for stricter buddy system protocols and more rigorous evaluation of divers' readiness for challenging sites. No one should die because they were pushed beyond their limits, he says in the safety briefings he now conducts for dive operators throughout New England. Ella's parents have established a scholarship in her name at Frederick Douglass High School, where she spent her career helping students navigate their own depths. Each year, it provides funding for a graduating senior who plans to pursue a career in counseling or social work, ensuring that Ella's nurturing spirit continues to guide others toward the surface when they're struggling. The truth behind closed doors can only come to light when we have the courage to share it. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. Leave a like so others can see this story and gain awareness. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Ella's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice. Perhaps the most profound question Ella's story leaves us with is about the nature of trust itself. How well can we ever know the person who sleeps beside us? When Ella stepped off that boat into the cold waters of Mount Hope Bay, she believed she was with someone who would protect her at all costs. Instead, the depths may have hidden the ultimate betrayal. As the waters of Mount Hope Bay continue to flow, carrying secrets in their currents, we're left to wonder what really happened in those final moments beneath the surface. Was it simply a tragic accident that claimed the life of a woman facing her fears for love? Or was it the perfect crime, planned in the darkness and executed where no one could witness it? The case of Ella Mack reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous waters are not those that surround us, but those that run deep in the hearts of those we trust. In the end, like the phantom shadows that give the trench its name, the complete truth may forever remain just beyond our reach, visible only in glimpses, before disappearing back into the darkness below. After exploring the shadows with us, you might find yourself craving stories that illuminate the brighter side of humanity. We recommend our friends at Sage King Stories, where you'll discover narratives of love, compassion, renewal, and the profound connections that heal us. Their channel celebrates those moments when light breaks through darkness, a perfect complement to our explorations here.